Welcome to Be Yoke, Be Your Own Guide. What if I said to you that you could change anything you want in your life just by changing the way you think? In fact, what if I say that that is the only way you can change anything in your life unless your thinking changes? Nothing else will truly ever change in your life. Welcome to this video series. The idea behind this series is to be a space where we'll not only listen to the wisdom from various ancient texts that I read out to you, but we'll also take moments to pause, reflect, and dive deeper into their meaning. I'll be sharing my thoughts along the way, pose reflection questions as I pose them to myself, as an invitation for all of us to turn inward, to explore how these ideas resonate within our own lives today. Because you see, at the heart of it all, I deeply, truly believe that we each must hone our ability to be our own inner guide. The more we understand our inner landscape of thoughts, emotions, narratives, hurt, beliefs, the more clarity we gain. The more clarity we gain, the lesser our mental emotional suffering. And any and all resources like the text that I'll be reading, these videos even, they're all just resources guiding us home to ourselves. Okay, so with that, let's begin. Today, I'll be reading from the text called the Dhammapada. Now, before I read from this text, I believe this is important for me to share that this text is public domain. It is made easily accessible thanks to the incredible work of the Gutenberg project, which has preserved and shared countless timeless works for all of us to explore. This is what the Gutenberg project, they mention in the ebook. This ebook is for the use of anyone, anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost, with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away, or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. I live in the United States, and so I'm grateful to the Gutenberg project to have made this available to us all. All right, so today we are doing Dhammapada, a collection of verses. It is one of the canonical books of the Buddhists, and this particular book has been translated by F. Max Müller. Dhammapada means, so pad is way, and Dhamma is in the Buddhist philosophy, in terms of Buddhist philosophy, Dhamma is basically the teachings of the Buddha. One could also think of it as it is the core wisdom that leads to enlightenment. And so the Dhammapada, the way to enlightenment. All right, with that, let's begin our first chapter called the Twin Verses. Now, reading from the text, verse 1. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him, as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. So let's break this down a bit. Yeah. First and foremost, very, very clearly, what's stating is that everything that you, me, anybody is in this moment is a result of their thoughts. Now, of course, it is important to not just take everything literally. So, which is to say, think about it as there are just so many words that can be used to explain anything. And these texts, they're not standalone texts. There are multiple texts that are brought that sort of work together. So yes, all we do is a result of what we have thought, And at the same time, so it starts from the thought, but the thought by and of itself will not do anything, of course. So the thought, then when the thought gathers enough intention, then it leads to the action. And everything, every action, behavior of ours is coming from a set of thoughts. Thus, we are a result of whatever we have thought. In practical terms, it is your actions that make you who you are. But really, what's driving the actions? It's these thoughts. Okay, so everything that we are is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. And then it says, if a man speaks or acts with an evil thought. Now, personally, in another lifetime, and when I say another lifetime, I mean, practically speaking, this life, but a different version of me, would not like that version of me would sort of get worse when I would hear things like, oh, evil, impure, bad, because I'm a little logical, analytical, and so I would be like, there's nothing bad, evil, and which is true. I still believe in it. But when some texts, especially wise wisdom texts full of wisdom, are using these words, try to understand what they're really pointing to, what they're really trying to say, beyond the conceptions that you might have, that you might be grasping onto of those words. And so when it says, if a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, evil basically meaning any thought, any thought that is not for the benefit of the self, of the other. And then it says, pain follows him. Another thing for any and all feminists out there. I also, I'm not even sure if I should say feminist, but anyone who might get triggered by my using him. Again, let's try and understand the context of these texts, right? So when these texts were written, things were the way they were. And again, if for a moment, not for your entire lifetime, but just for this moment, if you can let go of just the literal words, and again, try and absorb and try and soak in the wisdom that still remains. So a pain follows him. And what does that mean? That if someone speaks, acts with an evil thought, pain follows him. Now, pain, yes, visible pain is one, but in my experience and understanding, the pain is of the mental emotional suffering that follows. Let's say you feel angry and you feel righteous anger. Okay, so righteous anger is when you're feeling anger and you believe that you have the right to be angry. It is correct that you are angry right now. And again, no judgment to righteous anger. There's nothing wrong or right about righteous anger. Righteous anger is righteous anger. But when I act in a reactive way from that righteous anger, so which means if I feel like I am right to feel angry and this person must be shouted at, and then I shout at them, what is potentially most likely to follow sooner or later? Sooner or later, what's likely to follow is some form of guilt, some form of remorse, and or worse, the habit of anger becoming a strong pattern and a strong path. And anything in this mind's inner landscape, when it becomes a strong path, it just is so difficult to change, right? So the biggest pain that it would create is the potential of it becoming a habit. Now, I can feel the righteous anger and then pause and act with wisdom, responding in a way that is not intended to harm or that is intended to, as much as possible, minimize harm. That would be a very different story. Okay, let's come back here. So it says, If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him. As the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage, it's basically saying, so a lot of these texts have a lot of metaphors, and so it's basically saying, just like, I don't know if you've ever seen an ox plowing a field, and so the wheel of the plow, it, as the ox walks, the plow follows. There is no other way but for the wheel to follow the ox's foot. It will follow the ox's foot. I'm sorry, here they're not even talking about the plowing of the field. They're talking about a carriage. So if an ox is pulling a carriage, the wheel will follow wherever the ox goes. It is but bound to happen. And so almost every sort of argument or point or perspective in Buddhist philosophy texts is followed with an example, an analogy, a metaphor. So verse 2. Verse 2 says, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. So a lot of repetition also Buddhist texts have. In fact, from my understanding, most texts have repetition, and repetition is again something that an older version of mine would find very irritating, because the older version of mine thought, I already know this, move ahead. But over a period of time, I've realized that knowing, intellectual knowledge, is very, very, it's significant, but really in the large scheme of things, it's very insignificant. It is, unless that intellectual knowledge goes deep within you and becomes a part of you, which can only happen through repetition, experience, reflection, meditation, all of those pieces, it doesn't really make much of a difference. But that is not to say intellectual knowledge isn't good. What we're doing right now through this video is a lot of intellectual knowledge, and hopefully with some space of reflection. All right, so coming back to verse 2. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with a pure thought, happiness follows him like a shadow that never leaves him. Again, remember how I said a lot of metaphors are used. So just like a shadow doesn't leave you, similarly, happiness does not leave a pure thought. And again, quote and quote, within quotes, pure and impure. So a pure thought is primarily a thought that is for the benefit of the self, benefit of the other, does not intend, does not wish harm to anybody, no harm to self, no harm to the other. Then the third verse says, so I'm not staying on the second verse much. First and second are similar. The first talks about evil. If it's an evil thought, pain will follow. If it's a pure thought, happiness will follow. And these things will happen. That's just how nature is. Verse 3. He abused me. He beat me. He defeated me. He robbed me. In those who harbor such thoughts, hatred will never cease. Now, it's important to open ourselves up, especially to texts like these, because it can sort of feel a little, what are you saying? So if someone abuses me, if someone beats me, I should be okay with that? That's not what really it is saying. What it means is, I'll read it again. In those who harbor such thoughts, hatred will never cease. So which means that if I continually keep repeating the thoughts of he abused me, he said this to me, he behaved like this with me, he was physically violent with me, he defeated me, he, she, they, okay? He robbed me, he cheated me, he took advantage of me, he ... If these thoughts continually keep playing in my mind, it will generate anger, it will generate hatred, which are impure, evil thoughts, which are basically thoughts that are harming, forget the other, they are harming me tremendously. They are creating, I mean, if you want to talk more scientifically, medically, they are disturbing my hormonal balance, creating excessive stress. And stress sort of is the lead factor for any and all chronic lifestyle diseases, if not even other diseases. So, and which is to say, if someone is abusing you, if somebody does beat you, if someone is does rob you, cheat you, act, and don't just sit there like a sitting duck. Act on it. Whatever best you can, take support from others, reach out for help, whatever needs to be done, do all of that. And do what you can to not let these thoughts fester and corrupt your inner landscape. Then verse 4, he abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me. In those who do not harbor such thoughts, hatred will cease. Verse 5, for hatred does not cease by hatred at any time. And now something very cheesy, but very true. I've found all these sort of, whatever things, age-old sayings, they have a little bit of cheesiness, but there's sort of a lot of truth in them. And so verse 5 says, for hatred does not cease by hatred at any time. Hatred ceases by love. This is an old rule. And mind you, when the text reads love, it is not talking about the romantic love that, that's deep flames and I don't know, whatever else, right? That's not the love. In fact, in my personal experience and in my current understanding, most of us, when we say love or when we think of love, we are actually thinking of attachment and we are actually experiencing attachment. So when people say, oh, I'm in love with X, most people actually are attached to X. Depending on the amount of attachment and the kind of attachment, you call it love. But love, actually, ideally, the pure form of love is unconditional, free of attachment. Love just is. Love doesn't, you don't fall in love with, you just are. Love just is. You just are in love. You've always been in love, right? That's the sort of energy that love has. And so that's the love that we are talking about, the unconditional, compassionate, kind love, which is the only antidote to hatred. Verse 6. The world does not know that we must all come to an end here. Now, let me read this again. The world does not know that we must all come to an end here, but those who know it, their quarrels cease at once. End where? The world does not know that we must all come to an end here. Here, love. That we must all come to an end at love. But those who do know, then eventually it all needs to dissolve, it all will dissolve in love. Their quarrels will immediately, and these quarrels are not just with the other, these quarrels are in our own mind when I have, thoughts of, when I'm harboring thoughts of, that have direct, indirect, known, unknown, conscious, unconscious intentions of harm for myself or the other, those are quarrels within me. But if I truly understand that everything dissolves in love, then the quarrels will cease at once. Kabir Das, and I don't know, what do I call him? Spiritual poet, Indian origin. He was in India, I don't remember what century, but long back. And there's a doha, there's a proverb of his that says, पोती पढ़ पढ़ जग मुआ पंडित भयानक होए ढाई आखर प्रेम का पढ़े सुपंडित होए. Translation, पोती पढ़ पढ़ जग मुआ, read all kinds of books, You can read all kinds of books as a pandit, as a well-educated person does. Poti par par jagmua pandit bhayanak hoy. So you can read all of these books, all the books of the world, and yet you will not actually gain wisdom. So you can't just become a wise man by just reading all of these books of the world, of knowledge and whatever. But if you understand in Hindi, the word love is prem, or one of the words is prem. And prem is a 2.5 lettered word. And so dhai means 2.5. Dhai akhar prem ka, 2.5 letters of love. If someone understands that, then they become wise. So, and that's exactly what this text is telling us as well. Okay, now let's come to verse 7. He who lives looking for pleasures only, his senses uncontrolled, immoderate in his food, idle and weak. Mara is also known as the devil incarnate. The tempter, here in brackets, it said Mara, the tempter. And that's basically who the devil is. All our temptations, they're basically the works of the quote-unquote devil. Mara, the tempter, will certainly overthrow him as the wind throws down a weak tree. See again the metaphor. Just like a strong wind will throw down a weak tree, that is bound to happen. Similarly, someone who's only looking for pleasures, the sensory pleasures, has no control over food, over lazing around, over not having strong enough determination, not being strong-willed, not caring much, the temptations will overthrow such a person. And by the way, if this is hitting home and you're like, oh my God, I'm this person, I'll say two things. One, you might be over-exaggerating if you're thinking you're this person, because somebody who thinks they are all of these things usually have high the skill of being self-critical is very high in them. And so one, you might just be over-exaggerating, you're resonating with these points. Second, even if it's true, every single moment is a choice, and every next moment is a choice that you can make, and you can make a different choice at every moment, right? So what this verse is saying is that if this is who you are, then yes, temptations will overpower you, and it will be difficult for you in life to get what you want. If you have dreams, if you have dreams, if you have visions, if you have goals, if you want to be a certain person, you want to be a certain way, and you give in to temptations, it's going to be difficult, right? Verse 9. He who wishes to put on the yellow dress without having cleansed himself first from sin. Yellow dress, basically, most in India, a lot of religions will wear a yellow, yellow colored dress or whatever once they sort of move away from samsara, worldly life, and take the path of spirituality. So this is potentially controversial, but basically in Hinduism, yellow saffron is the color that you wear, that you don when you wanna, like that sort of signifies or tells the worldly people that this is a dharmic person, a religious person, a wise person. But this verse here is saying that he who wishes to put on the yellow dress without having cleansed himself from sin, and sin again is not, in quotes, sin. Sin is again basically anything, thought, action, anything that I do with the intention of harm to self or the other. It's a sin. Okay? So without having cleansed himself from sin, who disregards temperance and truth, is unworthy of the yellow dress. And maybe maybe a few years back, I would not have felt like, if I'd have read this, I'd have felt like, yeah, maybe, but that person's choice. However, today I feel I feel more like, when I read the sentence, it just lands more strongly with me that yes, it's true. If you've not actually done the work of walking the path, then wearing a dress is basically like a facade, and then, yeah, you're not worthy the dress. Though, as I'm saying this, I feel like this judgment in me towards potentially some people that I don't consciously, like, it's not in the foreground. I don't directly remember why, or which people are evoking this sense of judgment in me. But I think just mixed experiences, like experiences from the past, from a number of different people, probably in certain, in certain higher spaces in the religious spiritual space, but and they seem as if they're wise, and that they've worked on themselves, and yet when you interact with them at a deeper level, you realize you haven't yet worked with the with these pieces. And as I say this also, I'm doing a master's in Nalanda Buddhist philosophy and psychology. It's a 5 years master's, and my teacher, so the geshe in Tibetan language, professor, the word for professor is geshe. So geshe Damdul Dorji, his name is Damdul Dorji. So Geshe La is basically a form of respect. So Geshe La often, when he's reading translations, and some translations may not be, or maybe a little off or whatever, and so he'll mention that, oh, this is incorrect, and then at the same time he'll also say, if I'd have written this translations, I don't know how many mistakes I've made, and so kudos to the person who's written this translation. Because a part of the Mahayana teachings, I'll not get into details of Mahayana, but basically suffice for now to know, it's a school of Buddhist philosophy and psychology, and so in Mahayana teachings, it is very clearly said that do not defile somebody who's walking the path, no matter what, because when you defile somebody who's walking the path, you accumulate demerits. And so even though I say that, oh, there are some people who wear the yellow dress, but they haven't really worked on them. Who am I to say? I don't know their journey. I don't know their context. I don't know what's happening in that moment for them where I chose to judge them. Right? I have so many faltering moments. Oh my God, so many. And so a little bit of grace for all of us, others, and the self. Okay, so we'll read verse 9 and 10 together. He who wishes to put on the yellow dress without having cleansed himself from sin, who disregards temperance and truth, is unworthy of the yellow dress. Verse 10, but he who has cleansed himself from sin is well grounded in all virtues and regards also temperance and truth. He is indeed worthy of the yellow dress. This is self-explanatory. Who is well grounded in all virtues. Virtues, again, this is nothing to do with morality. Virtues, there's a number of different virtues mentioned, but again, suffice to say, right thought, right action, right livelihood, right and again, right means right, pure, virtuous. All of these things basically mean something done with the intention of no harm. And practically speaking, maybe you could say that there is no way to have zero harm, which is why some religious sects, so Jains, a sect in Jainism, they actually even put on a mask, because and they apologize a lot, like they're all the time saying sorry, like not just sorry, but it's a practice that, because every time I walk, every time I breathe, I'm killing so many organisms, and which is true. So there is no way of zero harm, but as much as possible, as much as I can hold my intention and try my best to minimize harm. Ideally, I'd want to do that, right? Okay, verse 9. They who imagine truth in untruth and see untruth in truth never arrive at truth but follow vain desires. Now, literally, like in literal sense, it's pretty simple. If you imagine truth when it is actually something that's untrue, right? So, for example, our example of righteous anger. If I say, "Oh, I'm correct to be angry because this person wronged me, and so they deserve what is happening to them," in even if it feels right, it is actually not right, because again, hatred will never cease hatred, wrong will never cease wrong. It just cannot happen. That's just not how nature is. In nature, when you plant an apple seed, the tree that comes out of that seed will only give apple fruits no matter what you do. You can try your best, you can pray to the, I don't know, whoever you believe in. You can do whatever you want, but the apple tree will never produce fruits anything but apples. And so similarly, if I act out of anger, and even if I think, and even if logically, analytically, it all makes sense that yes, this is the right thing to do, it can never be, because anger will only produce, the fruit of anger will only be anger. And by the way, all of this is not to say that I am a very, very non-angry and non-whatever person. I have a lot of struggles of my own. Yeah. And it's a journey for all of us. All right. Verse 12. And what you'll also notice in this text is, let me read verse 11 and 12 together, and so then you'll know. They who imagine truth in untruth and see untruth in truth never arrive at truth but follow vain desires. Next verse. They who know truth in truth and untruth in untruth. So they who know that, okay, this is true and this is untrue, arrive at truth and follow true desires. And so there's also this understanding of, not all desires are bad desires, not all ambitions are bad ambitions, right? And so vain desires versus true desires. And when I say the word vain, what comes up for me is almost like a shall, and this is something that I've struggled with, and I still struggle with. Some people I feel like, oh, this person is very shallow, they only care about their physical appearance, their dress, and this and that, and they don't have, they don't engage in any deeper conversations, and they don't do this and that, and that's my vain thought process. That's somebody else's vain. That's me being vain. Okay, now verse 13. As rain breaks through an ill-thatched house, right? So if a house does not have a good roof, the rain will break through it. So as rain breaks through an ill-thatched house, passion will break through an unreflecting mind. And so here the word passion is not used as, oh, good thing, I'm a passionate person, but here passion is used as somebody who's sort of driven by whatever emerges passionately in them, and somebody who's not able to actually sit and respond, but they're reactive to what's happening. So just like rain will break through the ill-thatched house, similarly passion, that kind of an energy, will break through let me read the exact will break through an unreflecting mind. So if your mind is not able to pause, reflect, understand, observe, see what's actually the truth, passion will break through, which means all of these emotions. And we've been talking about anger, but anger is one manifestation of such unreflecting mind. Such an unreflecting mind manifests in anger, in fear, in anxiety, in low self-esteem, in all of these many ways. And similarly, of course, also in thinking too much of yourself, too much pride, too much, all of those things. Both sides, overconfidence, underconfidence, both are aspects of an unreflecting mind in my understanding and experience. Verse 14. As rain does not break through a well thatched house, passion will not break through a well reflecting mind. Verse 15. The evildoer mourns in this world and he mourns in the next. He mourns in both. He mourns and suffers when he sees the evil of his own work. Evildoer, again, somebody who intentionally, unintentionally, consciously, unconsciously creates harm for the self and the other. They will mourn in this world, which means they will suffer in this world. They will mourn in the next. We can go into the depths of what that means in the next world, hell, heaven, whatever else. There is a concept of bardo in Buddhist philosophy. In fact, bardo has a lot of connotations in Buddhist philosophy. In some sense, we are in bardo right now as well. Basically, bardo is the waiting period, and so after death, there is some bardo period, and then from there you enter into the next life, next world. And why does it say that the evildoer will mourn in this and the next both? Because whatever I nurture over a lifetime is what I will carry into the next. Whether or not you believe in life after life, you can't ignore, or let me change the sentence structure. You have to, or no, let me change that also. Whether or not you believe in life after life, you potentially might agree that everything is energy. The entire universe is made of atoms. If you don't agree, maybe consider, and well, science will tell you the same thing. The entire universe is nothing but atoms of different nature. So some earth element based, fire element based, water element, air element, and then the element of ether or space that allows for different forms to exist, because if there was no space at all, then everything would be clumped together, right? So the entire universe is basically atoms of different nature come together in different states. Some are solids, some are liquids, some are gases, some are in between these. But basically the entire universe is atoms. And what is the nature of atoms? Atoms are continually moving, continual movement. That's atoms, and this movement that these atoms create is called energy, right? So and then law of physics says energy is neither created nor destroyed. So energy is always moving in continuum, neither created nor destroyed. It can seem as if it has come up and gone down, and so in terms of humans and our lives, we say, oh, alive now. When birth happens, we says, oh, now this child is alive. Oh, when death happens, we say, now this child is dead. But actually it is just energy that when enough of certain kinds of energies came together, it manifested in the form of this child that you and I saw, and we said, oh, alive. This is life. And when these energies, for whatever terms and conditions, were no more met, these energies began to dissipate, and eventually they completely dissipated, not dissolved, but dissipated. And now we couldn't see those energies together in this form that we are so used to seeing. So we said dead. But actually it's these energies that are moving. They were moving in some form, and then they changed form and moved in some other form. And thus, coming back to our verse 15, the evildoer mourns in this world and he mourns in the next. He mourns in both, because whatever habit patterns I have formed in this life, there is an energy to that. And even after this body, at my death, the body disintegrates, but there's some energy that carries on, and it may carry on in some other way, shape, form, doesn't matter, but that energy will exist. And so that energy will still create similar suffering, similar mourning, just like an apple seed will only give you a tree that will produce apple fruits. He mourns and suffers when he sees the evil of his own work. So when I see the life that is getting created, the feelings that I feel, whatever, it creates more suffering in me, and that's me mourning my own work. Not many at times, but at times some people feel, oh, why is all of this happening to me? Why is all of this happening to me? There are times there are times when this thought has come up to me as well, that why is this happening? Why is this happening again and again to me? And then, I the moment that thought comes, I realize two things. One, that I'm feeling a little helpless in this moment. And two, that this things are happening. They're not happening to me. Yeah. So the false belief that this is happening to me is a false belief. Things are happening. Things are playing out. Do you have a role in it? Absolutely. Can you change? Absolutely. Right? Okay. Verse 16. The virtuous man delights in the world and he delights in the next. He delights in both. So the opposite of the verse before. He delights and rejoices when he sees the purity of his own work. So let's say if you were in a space where no matter what happened in your life, no matter who said what, did what, whether you were accepted for things you applied for, rejected for those things, no matter what happened, you were able to pause, allow the emotions, feelings to come up, acknowledge them, feel them. So if happiness, unhappiness, anger, peace, gratitude, whatever comes up, acknowledge them and allow them in. You did that, and then you responded from a stable, grounded space. I don't know if you heard that. If you heard that, that's Brew, my dog. She is seeing another dog. You in the picture on the screen, what you see is basically it's trees which are barren right now because I'm in Wisconsin and this is the month of starting of April, so snow. So we're towards the end of the winters. Soon they will all be green, but right now, as you can see, they're all brown. But there's a hiking trail here, and so Brew saw a dog being walked there. Okay, I'm sorry, we went off a little, but it's important for you to know because Brew is a part of me and my life, and so she will join in at different times with her barking and whatever else that she does. So what was I sharing? So if you were in that space where you could respond from a stable, grounded space, what do you think? How do you think you'll feel? How do you think you'll be? There will be nothing but delight and rejoice. Verse 17. The evildoer suffers in this world and he suffers in the next. He suffers in both. He suffers when he thinks of the evil he has done. He suffers more when going on the evil path. Now, this is very similar, but I think the point to remember here is, or the point to focus on here is, it says he suffers when he thinks of the evil he has done, and he suffers even more when going on the evil path. So, just a moment ago, I was talking about every moment is a choice, and even if you're associating or resonating with, not having strong enough determination or giving in to circumstances or feeling or procrastinating, all of those things, every moment is a choice. But what happens is that now let's say if I spend a month doing nothing and I think, okay, I will do this, but then temptations take over and then I don't do it. Again, temptations take over and don't do it. And this, I'm sure you've probably experienced this. I know I have. There is a suffering that is created from thinking of what I am doing or not doing. Right? So if I've been procrastinating, thinking about how I've been procrastinating creates suffering in me. But what creates even more suffering in me is when I continue going on that path. And the opposite of that, verse 18, the virtuous man is happy in this world, and he is happy in the next. He is happy in both. He is happy when he thinks of the good he has done. So think about, like, if you've ever made a checklist and you like, okay, done this, done this, done this, the entire to-do list is done, and you feel like this burst of energy, right? So he's happy when he thinks of the good he has done, and he's still more happy when going on the good path. So when going on that path, so when I continually every day I show up to my commitment. Let's say my commitment was, okay, every day I'll go for a 40-minute walk. Every day I do it, every day I do it, every day I do it. 7th day I, for whatever reasons, I don't. 8th day I again get up and again do it. That makes me feel so happy. Yeah? So walking the path makes me feel even more happy. Verse 19. The thoughtless man, even if he can recite a large portion of the law, and so here the law, basically they're saying religious text, but is not a doer of it. And so this is where the whole piece of intellectual knowledge, knowing something and actually doing that something, implementation of it. The thoughtless man, even if he can recite a large portion of the law but is not a doer of it, has no share in the priesthood. And here priesthood doesn't mean the priesthood literally, but basically has no share in the wisdom, but is like a cowherd counting the cows of others. No judgment here to the cowherds, but this is a metaphor. He's like a cowherd who is counting other people's cows. Yeah, what good does it do to a cowherd if they're counting somebody else's cows? Like if I'm a cowherd, I gotta count my own cows and be sure if all my cows are there at the end of the day, right? Verse 20, the follower of the law, even if he can recite only a small portion of the law, but having forsaken passion and hatred and foolishness, possesses true knowledge and serenity of mind, he, caring for nothing in this world and that to come, has indeed a share in the priesthood, in the wisdom, in the space path to enlightenment. That is chapter 1, the twin verses. And so as we've read now the verses, the twin verses, so every 2 verse, they're twins basically, right? I want to talk a little bit again about this, the last verse, the follower of the law, even if he can recite only a small portion. There is merit in learning up text, spiritual text. There definitely is some merit. Like there are some texts that I try to memorize. One of these texts that I currently, by currently I mean last number of months, or actually for a long time it's been there with me, but last few months I've ensured that I memorize it. It goes, this is how it goes. It says, just like in the dream of a young girl, she met with a boy and saw his death. Joyous was she at the meeting, and in agony at his death. View all phenomena as such. So, and there is merit in me memorizing this, because as I bring back the words, I can deepen my reflection of what the words mean. So there is merit there. But if I just mug up and rote learn, and again, not to judge rote learning. As I said, rote learning has its own place. But if I just rote learn a number of texts but never actually sit down, reflect on what these words actually mean, what's the point? Because change is not going to happen by my memorizing all of this. Change will only happen when, along with the memory, along with the texts that I can recall, I'm also able to reflect on what these texts mean. Yeah? And thus we've spent 50 minutes now on just these 20 verses, and even these 20 verses are basically twin verses. So in a way, just 10 verses. In the master's course that I'm doing, Geshe-la, he, at times it's an hour and a half, 2 hour class, and all we've done is what, 4 or 5 paragraphs, because there is so much to reflect on, to break down, to decipher, to understand, to connect with one's own life, to connect with one's own truth. So that is Dhammapada chapter 1 for you. This video is on Buddha's teachings and how they potentially can transform our lives, and the idea again being that just by changing the way we think, we can transform our lives. And so from this particular chapter, what we're seeing is that if I'm able to begin working on letting go of the thoughts of, let me step back a little, okay? Let me take a few steps back. So I work at the intersection of coaching, therapeutic modalities, and spirituality. And therapy, the goal of therapy is to help you move from a sense of, from an unhealthy sense of self to a healthy sense of self. What is an unhealthy sense of self? Any sense of self which is not at the right sort of level, which means if I think too much of myself or if I think too little of myself, they are both unhealthy. So if I'm overconfident, that's unhealthy. If I'm underconfident, that's unhealthy. If I'm too angry and too aggressive, that's unhealthy. If I'm too meek and just can't take decisions or take action, that's unhealthy. So the idea of therapy being to move from that unhealthy sense of self to a healthy sense of self. Healthy sense of self being when I can see me for me as I am in this moment, understanding that every moment I have a choice and I can choose to change the way I am in this moment. And just because I am a certain way doesn't mean I am broken or I'm not good or I'm not, da 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 da. So that's the goal of therapy, to move you from an unhealthy sense of self to a healthy sense of self. And the idea of spirituality is to take you from that healthy sense of self and to move you towards a sense, an understanding, and the wisdom of selflessness. Selflessness is not so much about the generosity of being selfless, and that's a part and parcel of the work. But here, selflessness is that the idea of me, I, does not exist, right? There are three big fallacies: the subject, the other, and the action. That X did A to me. X is the other, the object, me is the subject, and did A to me is the action. So the subject, action, object. These are fallacies. Maybe we spoke about how everything is just energy, atoms, atoms, atoms in different shapes and form. And so if you extrapolate that understanding, then we're all just exactly the same. We're all atoms, atomic energy. Yeah. All right. With that, I'm going to close out this video for the day. I hope this was helpful. I hope it nudged you into your own reflection. It nudged you to maybe question some things, to maybe deepen some understanding, some insight. This is the idea behind this series. Every video will have some of the other excerpt from a text, and I'll read the text. I'll share my understanding of the text. And I would love to know how these videos land with you, what you think of them. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear. Put them down in the comment section. And if you have any suggestions about the text that you'd want me to read from, any of that, let me know. All right. Okay. Take care. May we all be happy. May we all be well. May we all blossom, prosper. May we all continually work towards the benefit of ourselves, the benefit of others. May we all learn to walk home to ourselves. Tathastu. May it be so.